Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Poets Corner. Today I'm joined by famous author, poet, and illustrator Shel Silverstein. Shel, good to have you.
Thanks, good to be here.
So I'd like to start by asking you a few questions about your biography. How did your experience in the military influence your works?
Well, in the 1950s, I served in the military in Korea and Japan. While here, I started drawing cartoons for the soldiers' newspaper, Stars and Stripes Pacific Edition. I remember skipping out on duties to roam the station to look for influences for my cartoons.
Fascinating. And what made you want to write children's books?
Well, actually, I never thought of myself as a children's author, but my good friend Tomi Unager convinced me to start. She practically dragged me to Ursula Nordstrom's office, and together we created the Giving Tree. I didn't expect the response I received, but I am eternally grateful for it.
What was your relationship with music and Johnny Cash?
Well, me and Johnny Cash were great friends. Together, we wrote A Boy Named Sue. It became Johnny's top pop hit and was #2 on the charts for 3 whole weeks. I wrote a few other things as well, but I think Johnny enjoyed my sense of humor.
And why do you think that you did not perform very well academically?
Well, as a child, I mainly spent my free time drawing rather than studying. My father hated that I constantly doodled all the time, but my mother supported my artistic endeavors.
And along with poetry and art, are there any other forms of artistic expression that you take part in?
Yeah, when I was a child, I had a certain fondness for country-style music. I could also play the ukulele.
When you were attending the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, you left only 1 year after starting. What caused the decision for you to leave?
Well, I attended an academy, but I knew that I didn't really fit in, though I mainly worked alone and rejected help from the professors.
All right, moving on. What do you think makes your children's poetry different from other traditional children's poetry?
Well, basically, traditional children's poetry is boring. It's all about morals and lessons, but there's no entertainment value. I write stories that kids can relate to and actually want to read.
Do you feel that your art will still be popular 100 years from now?
Yes, I think so. The subjects I write about are subjects that all kids can relate to, like questioning grown-ups. Also, kids will always laugh at bathroom humor.
Do you feel that it is important to question tradition and try to view things in a different way?
Absolutely. One of my most famous poems is about questioning what your teachers, parents, and friends say is true, and what is right for you.
Why do you feel like your poetry was more valued than the work of other children's poets?
Well, I feel like the children reading my poems were able to experience it not only as words being spoken, but as sounds of voices making. My poems were more about the humor and wordplay, which make it more fun for them.
Did you ever expect the amount of success that your children's books received?
I never would have expected it, but people really enjoyed it, so I kept giving the people what they wanted.
Why do you think it was easier for children and adults to interpret your poetry compared to others?
I believe my poetry was easier to interpret because there wasn't much to it. Most of my poems were no longer than 4 or 5 lines, and the illustrations alongside them helped some imagine what was being said. Even though they were short, they carried enough weight and pleasure to where readers really just understood it.
All right, well, that was a great interview, Shel. Thank you very much. We'll see you on next week's episode of Poets Corner.
Bye, guys.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places.
But I mean, that works too, that's fine. All right, and why do you think you did not perform very well academically?
Well, as a child, I mainly spent my free time drawing rather than studying. My father hated that I constantly doodled all the time. My mother supported my artistic endeavors.
Autistic? You mean artistic? Oh my god. Do you feel that's in... Damn it. Why do you think your poetry was more valued than other children's poets' work?
I feel like the children reading my poems were able to experience it not only as words being spoken, but as sounds of voices making. My poems were more about the humor and word play, which make it more, which more it fun for them.
Why do you think that your poetry was more valued than other children's poets' work?
I feel like the children reading my poems were able to experience it not only as words being spoken, but as sounds of voices making. My poems were more about the humor and wordplay, oh my god.
Which?
I started thinking about autistic and I was trying to laugh.
You made it. Isn't it?
Even later. Damn it. Wait, just keep going. This doesn't make sense. All right, and just one final question. Why do you think it was easier for children and adults to interpret your poetry compared to others?
I believe my poetry was easier to interpret because there wasn't much to it. Most of my poems were no longer than 4 or 5 lines, and the illustrations alongside them helped some imagine.
No, you almost didn't know.